Friends, yesterday we discussed about what exactly it means by structuralism, and even we discussed about how structuralism is very close to science and how it has been applied to the literature, how it is initiated by Claude Lévi-Strauss in anthropology, and then Ferdinand de Saussure, the very famous linguist who initiated the studies. Now, we have talked yesterday also about three two different meanings that Saussure is emphasizing about structuralism. Now, let us move for the what third sort of thing that Saussure is interested in talking about. That he's giving three pronouncement, of which we have discussed yesterday. Two pronouncement. The first one we said that we give meanings to the words which are purely arbitrary, and these meanings are maintained by conventions only. That is what he said in the first pronouncement. Then second pronouncement we discussed that meanings of the words are relational, and we also discussed yesterday that no word can be defined in isolation from other words, and we talked about the example of hut and discussed that thing, and even we talked about Sasur's very famous example of the 825 train from Geneva to Paris, and how he mentioned that it is purely a relational thing that we are trying to find it out. Meanings are meanings of the words are absolutely relational. Now the third pronouncement that Saussure is talking about. Thirdly, for Saussure, my friends, language constitutes our world, and it does not just record it or label it. He says that meaning is always attributed to the object or idea by human mind, and is constructed by and expressed through language. It is, let me say, that the way it is expressing the things, the meaning is already what we usually feel is that meaning is already there in the word. It contained the meaning, but Saussure said that it doesn't contain any sort of meaning in it. A very important example we can talk about. For example, take the two words terrorist or freedom fighter. What Saussure is saying, the third pronouncement, that language constitutes our world. It doesn't just record it or label it. Meanings are attributed. Meanings are attributed. Please understand, the first one is meanings are arbitrary, second meanings are relational, third meanings are attributed. For making it a little bit clear to all of us, what is this attribution he's talking about? He's talking about the two words. Take for example, terrorist or freedom fighter. Now there is no neutral or objective way to designate such a person, merely a choice of two terms which construct that person in a particular way. You cannot label someone because you cannot, there is no neutral way to define what is or who is who. There is another example in political system during 80s, 1980s, when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister of United Kingdom. She imposed a tax, and most of the opposition members of United Kingdom, they used to say that Margaret Thatcher imposed a poll tax, P-O-L-L, poll tax. Now, this poll tax in history of England is related with the images of Middle Age or peasants' revolt that took place in England against that poll tax. Peasants in England, they revolted against the poll tax of during Middle Ages. So the same way the opposition is saying that Margaret Thatcher imposed a poll tax, but Margaret Thatcher, instead of using the negative word tax, she used the word community, and she says that it is that the way that she's trying to put it in front of all these people with a favored term called community, and the term community used, or you can say that the term for this tax, which opposition used to say the poll tax, she imposed for the domestic tax, the or community tax. She used, because tax, the word, it is used by some individual who is having certain political position, because this is the, in a political system you will find that opposition used to follow or use such type of words. Again, you will find out using such type of words, which I said usually opposition used to have such kinds of words. There is no neutral agenda behind it, no neutral objective behind it. There is a complete political motive behind using that particular word, using that particular idea. It is said that there has been, or there are three versions of every story. There are three versions of every story: your version, my version, and the truth. These are the three versions in every story in the world. Your story, my story, and the truth. But here, the case is complicated, that when you talk about all these things, or all the available terms with us, all these terms are purely linguistics. Now here you will, what I am saying, the three versions, your story, my story, and the truth, this is absolutely a philosophical way to understand the thing. But when you are using word, it has got, it comes under a pure term called linguistics, because it is related about the word that is being used. So in this, use of word, there is no truth which is existing outside of the language. You cannot find out anything which is outside of the language. Wherever we look, we see language constituting the world in this way only, because the word which you use, the meaning of the word is taken into consideration. Nobody is thinking completely that there is another truth, actual truth is there. Nobody talks about that. And that is how we have to understand it. Excuse me, friend. So, what he is telling, that the language language is constituting the world in this way only, where you find out that how you use it, how you use the word. You will find out that the word which is used, as you have seen in United Kingdom or opposition using a one specific word, or even in our India, in our even nowadays in Maharashtra, you will find out the same thing. That the word which is used, it reflects its meaning to the people in the same fashion. Another example, the words for colors make a reality. This is very common in today. If you take it as a political statement or you take it as a social statement. The words for colors. Now you are not talking of anything. If you use one particular color, you have been labeled immediately. You are not using any word for that particular thing. The words for color make a reality nowadays, or it is usually happens. Now they don't just name the things. The things which are there. Nobody is mentioning the name for that particular thing. If you see the spectrum is divided into 7 colors. The 7 are 7 primary colors. And those 7 primary colors, all the colors can be merged into one particular color. So we can have 14 names for that, but we don't. Or another example for you to understand very same comfortably. There are 4 seasons in a year: summer, autumn, winter, spring. These are the 4 seasons. Now, these 4 seasons coming in a year, they are coming continuously. And when they are coming continuously, they are coming without giving you any break or giving without any decisive changes. It not in reality divided into four seasons. In reality, it is not divided into four seasons. But we have considered it in four seasons. Why not we have made it in six? Why not we call it in eight? Why there are only four? Why we have given four names only? Why not six names? Why not eight names? Why not 14 names for the colors? Why the spectrum is only of seven colors? When you merge with colors, you can get another colors. Why you haven't primary names? I say. What Sasur say is that the seasons are a way of seeing the year, not an objective fact of nature. So Sasur's thinking stressed the way language is arbitrary, relational, and constitute. Because language is not confirmed, it is not the same. It will not carry the same meaning. As I have given you the example of the word freedom fighter and terrorist. For most of the, even you can say, Britishers, Bhagat Singh was a terrorist, or all the revolutionary freedom fighters in India, they consider them as a terrorist. But for India, but for the history of India, they are freedom fighters. But the word constitutes them, and it is relational, as we have seen it in yesterday's discussion also. So Sasur's this thinking that language is arbitrary, relational, and constitutive, and this way of thinking about language influenced structuralism very much. And this Sasur gave a sort of different kind of understanding if you see very carefully. Now, Sasur very categorically tries to make a difference in this use of language, because this is the one way. Meaning is arbitrary, meaning is relational, and meanings are attributed. It is attributed. And that's why he come to a conclusion which affected the structuralist thinking is in the form that language is arbitrary, relational, and constitutive. You can constitute a word for one particular thing, and that word is permanently getting that particular meaning. You can get ample of examples in present scenario. It is constituted with one word particularly, and that is becoming, that word is carrying the same sort of meaning with it. Now, one another distinction made by Sassoon gives structuralist a way of thinking about larger structures which are relevant to the literature. He's talking about a larger structure. He profoundly influenced contemporary literary theory. Saussure's two key ideas, that is another distinction I'm talking about, the first distinction we talked about. If you see Saussure's two ideas, two key ideas, provide new answers to the questions which I yesterday already explained to you. Again, I'll repeat those two questions. What is the object of linguistic investigation? This is the one question he's talking about. And another question is, what is the relationship between words and things? And he makes a fundamental distinction between lang and parole, these two words. Please remember these two words very categorically. Lang, Langue, lang, and parole, Parole. He makes a fundamental distinction between language and parole, or you can say between language system, the language system which pre-exists actual aspect or actual examples of language and its individual utterances. There are certain examples in language for certain things. But if individual is using it, he will use it as per his convenience, as per his comfortability. What is lang? Lang is the social aspect of language. Lang is social aspect of language. It is the shared system which we unconsciously draw upon as speakers. There are certain shared understanding, and we used to follow that shared understanding always. Speakers know that what they are saying is known to the audience. That's why they use the shared symbols or shared uh, system. And parole is the individual realization of the system. Individual. In the actual instances of the language, the way you use the language, you are using certain words for your own meaning of that particular word. You try to constitute your own. So lang is social aspect of language. Parole is individual realization of language. That's why I said just a moment before that there are three versions: your story, my story, and the truth. And we used to talk about all those two things only in real aspect. We never talk about the truth of the language. We talk about only the two things: your story, my story. Social aspect, what society commonly thinks about that particular one word, that one particular meaning. And there are certain common myths that everyone knows. That is a common shared system, shared understanding of that particular one myth. And there is a parole, individual realization. If you see, mythologies play a crucial role. For example, I'll give this example. Ravana, Ravan, which you should say. In a shared system, in some part of the, the area, Ravan is a villain in mythology, and this is a shared system. And Ram in mythology was the hero of that epic. Now, it is a shared system. If you use the word Ram from Ramayana or Ravan from Ramayana, it is a shared system, so everybody knows what you want to talk about. But in parole, it is lang. But in parole, individual realization. In individual realization, Ravana may be the hero for someone. Not essential that he is to be villain always. He is hero for someone. For someone, Ram is not hero. If you see recently one very famous novel written by Ananda Neelkanthan called Asura. And in Asur, he projected Ravan as the hero of the whole incidents. Or even he wrote another novel called Ajeya. And in Ajeya, he said that Duryodhana's original name was Suyodhana because you want to project Duryodhana as a villain, so you say it is Duryodhana. Actually, his name is Suyodhana. That is perception. Again, I am saying. So there is a parole, self-realization, individual realization. So Sasur is talking about these two distinction between lang and parole. And this distinction is very much essential to the latter structuralist or latter theories that appeared in structuralism. The proper object of linguistic study is the system which underlies any particular human signifying practice, not individual utterances. What is individual utterances is not that much of importance. The object of linguistic study is what commonly being used, what commonly people are thinking, what is the meaning of that particular thing. This means that if we examine specific poems or myths, or even you can say economic patterns or practices, economic practices, we do all these things to discover some rules. What I said yesterday, rules, grammar. Human beings use speech quietly different from parrots. Parrots can also speak. If you train them, they'll speak, they'll talk. But the way human being uses language in a different way. And parrots, animals use language in a different way. Why I use the example of parrot? Because we find most of the time that parrots are trained to talk, are trained to speak. Human being, when speaking, grasp the system of rules. We know the rules. Now you will say, sir, how? Because if you see very carefully, and I used to say this always, that when you speak or when you start to speak, a kid when he begins to speak at his very infant age, or when you have started speaking at your early age, do you ever find or do you ever see that any mother firstly teaching that child a grammar? No, but he knows grammar very well because there are specified systems in human societies. Those teach the grammar instead of teaching deliberately the grammar. That is what which happens with English. We try to learn deliberately grammar. And that's why we feel English is the difficult language and we say that English grammar is difficult. I am not understanding. There is no specific way to learn grammar. If you start reading, if you start speaking, you can able to learn the grammar easily. Everybody in the society doesn't know the grammar. If you go into the market and ask any person who is speaking any language, either Marathi, Hindi, you ask him, do you know this grammar? What language structure you have used? He said, I don't want to use that, but I have learned that. Unknowingly, everybody learns grammar because grammar is the rule. And because human being knows how to apply rule, how to use rule. Applying rule of language helps human being or enables human being to produce infinite number of sentences. You can produce infinite number of sentences. I'm giving deliberately an example of your mother tongue. When you're talking in mother tongue, you're talking ample of words. If you try to test it, check it, how much sentences you utter in a day when you talk with someone or when you talk from morning till you sleep at night. And nobody will say that you have used wrong grammar into it, or your grammar is not correct. Because you know the rules, how to operate the language. You learn that rules from the society itself. And that's why you are using those rules, and that understanding of the rule enables you to use infinite number of statements where the animals can't. Where parrot can't, because parrot, although you train the parrot to speak certain words, he can't make a sentence then. And that's why Saussure says that language is a complete system. Saussure rejected the idea, very, very, very important idea he rejected, that language is a word heap gradually accumulated over the time, and that its primary function is to refer the things in this world. That is what we used to say, and that is what very commonly, uh, as a teacher of English, I can say that we find in the society that most of the students who want to understand English, they say, sir, how can I build up my vocabulary? Building up a vocabulary is not by purchasing a book and by hearting those words and saying that, okay, I know these much words, doesn't mean you are having a good sense of language. How you use it, that is most important. And that's why Sasu rejected that idea that those whosoever. Have you ever collected words for learning your mother tongue, Marathi or Hindi or Arabic or Urdu? You haven't collected words first. You started speaking, you started formulating the sentences, and slowly you are gathering the words as per the individual realization of using the word for one particular thing. And that's why he rejected that the idea that for language you have to collect the words a lot and then gradually you accumulate the words over period of a time and then you try to use it. He says it is not at all possible, it is not at all done. In Sasur's views, words are not symbols which corresponds to certain reference. You are referring it to certain things, that this word is referred to this word is referred to this. In Sasur's view, words are not symbols which corresponds to the reference, but he says they are signs. Yes, IGNS, they are signs which are made up of two parts. Please understand this very interesting concept that Saussure is initiating. Words are not symbols which are referring to the certain things. Words are signs which are made up of two parts, like two sides of one sheet. One sheet of a paper is having two sides always. A mark, either written or spoken, which he calls as signifier, spoken or written. There is a mark. Marks certain things that he calls it as a signifier. And the concept, what is thought when the mark is made. When you are making mark for certain things, you have certain notion about it, certain concept about it in your mind. I'm saying I'm using one word for that one particular thing. Why I'm using that word? The concept is in your mind already there. You're calling for that concept. So mark is signifier, which is written or which is spoken, and concept, that what is thought when you are making this mark, is called as signified. Please understand, signifier is a mark or the written or spoken language, that is signifier, and the concept for using that particular word or that particular language is signified. If you say symbol is equal to thing, that is what commonly we used to understand. But what Sasur's model is, sign. Word is a sign. And he says, what you write for one particular thing. Suppose you are saying this is the page. You gave name it as a page. Now when you mark it as a page, or you say it is a page, or you write it that this is the page. Now when you're writing it as a page, some concept of this is in your mind already there. So when you're writing it, he called it as a signifier. And what is the concept? He called it as a signified. With these two things, the sign is made. The sign is there, and that's why I said the word is actually a sign, not a symbol. Saussure says that things have no place in the model. The elements of language which we acquire, the language which acquire meaning, is not as the result of some connection between words and things. There is no connection between words and things. And that's why he said meaning is arbitrary. There is no connection of words and things, but only as part of system of relation. You relate that word to that particular thing. To understand this concept in a very simple form, please understand the concept of traffic signals. When the red light is there, there are three lights, if you see very carefully in traffic signal: red, amber, and green. Now, when red is said or red light is there, what it means by? It means by stop. Does every red means stop, or red at particular situation is stop? Red is in traffic city light, or you can say, sir, how you have to attribute red as a stop continuously. Now, if you are using red uh, color, you are wearing a red color dress, does it mean that you have to stop? No, that connection is something different. The traffic signal, red means stop. Red is signifier, and what is the concept behind this red is stop. That is signified. Nobody says. That is what given there. If there is some other color and it suggests that okay, you have to stop after this color will display, the concept behind using that color is the same. It is the concept. Not because of that color you are stopping. It is because of the concept that is behind this color. The sign signifies only within the system. It is within that system the meaning of the red is to stop. Generally, meaning of the red is not stop. Then the whole life will be in chaos. If you are attributing, if you are saying that okay, the meaning of the red means stop only, nothing else. No. The sign signifies only within the system. Please understand this. In the system of traffic light, red means stop, amber means prepare for red or green means to move, to go. So the relation, please understand this relation. The relation between signifier and signified is arbitrary. There is no natural bond between red and stop. Again, I am saying this. No matter how natural it may feel to you, but it is not having any natural connection into it. It depends on the situation, it depends on that system. That's why it is arbitrary. There's a very interesting thing happened. When British people joined EEC, that is electrical coding, color coding. Electrical color coding. If you ask any lineman, when you see in some houses the wiring is taking place in the house, there are specific colors of wires they used to keep there, and there is red wire and black wire. Black is always considered as neutral wire, neutral electricity, and red is considered as a live electric flow. Now, when the new electric color coding has been accepted across the world, it seems to be very unnatural. Brown, they have used it as for the live, and blue for the neutral. Now, most of the people in the world, they are not familiar with this color coding, brown and blue, because red and black, those two color coding in electrical wiring is known to every, because that is how electrical coding used to happen. But if you change it, now the concept behind changing it is not clear, so nobody will accept it. That's why the Lang and parole. It is a parole, individual realization that, okay, I'll not use red, I'll use brown. Okay, but tomorrow if you are not there and if some problem takes place, the person who is coming there to rectify it will not able to understand which is the live electric or electric running, but electric flow, or which is the neutral electric flow. He will not able to understand it. That's why you have to follow the Lang. That's why each color in the traffic system signifies not by asserting a positive univocal meaning. It is not asserting, but it is marking a difference, a distinction within a system of opposite and contrast. Traffic light, if it is red, means it is not green. Or when it is green, it is not red. That is what commonly we understand. It is not asserting. You cannot say it is not green, so we will stop. No, because it is red, you are stopping. And that's why Saussure says that language is one among many science systems. Language is not the only science system, is one amongst the many. Otherwise, you will say that if language is the only science system remain in this world, then how the animals would communicate? How those who are not able to speak communicate? Have you seen any dumb speaking with his fingers and with their language of science they are speaking? Because some believe that language is the fundamental system. No, Saussure objected for that. Language is not a fundamental system. Language is one among the many science systems. And the science of such science of such science systems is called as semiotics or semiology. Please understand. It is usual, my friends, to regard structuralism and semiotics belongs to the same theoretical universe. It is usually regarded as such. Structuralism, it must be added, is often concerned with systems which do not involve science as such, but which can be treated in the same way as science systems. It is sort of science systems. It has its own system. If you say it is a science system, then you will say that red needs to be permanently a color for a stop. It is stop for that particular science system. Traffic movement. That's why red flag in train means stop. Traffic movement. In traffic science system, red is stop. Not in all sorts of science systems. And that's why you will find out that various scholars, philosophers, they defined, they designed, they discussed the science systems, and you will find out, my friends, that science systems, which are the most important aspect, which are the most important part of any of the understanding of structure, making you to understand that this is how it goes on. Now, if you see the scope of structuralism is not just about language and literature. Please understand this. When Sasur's work was co-opted in 1950s by the people to whom we now call it as structuralists, their feeling was that Sasur's model of how language works was transferable and would also explain how all signifying system works. This was a common understanding of all the structuralists of the time. But the anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss applied the structuralist outlook to the interpretation of myths. Even you can apply the Strauss method to the myths. He applied the structural outlook to interpret the myth. And he suggested, very interestingly, he suggested that the individual tale, again, whenever word individual come, it is parole. Please understand. It's a simple thing to remember, I'm telling you. Common attribution is lang. Individual attribution is parole. So that the individual tale from the cycle of myths did not have a separate and inherent meaning, but could only be understood by considering its position in the whole cycle, that is lang. If you're trying to have an individual tale in that particular myth, Mahabharata, this is a complete mythology, epic, you say. And out of which you are taking a story of Yayati. There's an individual tale from that cycle of myths. Now, this, or you are taking only the story of Hidimba and Bhim. You're taking only that story out of that complete cycle. It does not have a separate meaning, but you have to understand its position in the whole cycle. If you're taking only the way Sita is being kidnapped by Ravana and the way the Garud used to stop Ravan from taking Sita away, if you're taking only that story is not having a complete meaning in itself. You can draw the meaning, okay, individually. But you have to consider this story in the whole cycle. You have to find out the similarities and difference between the tale and others in the sequence. So if you are interpreting Oedipus myth, if you are trying to connect, I think you know Oedipus. It is a Greek story. And Oedipus was the king who killed his father unknowingly and married to his mother. That is what I'm saying. It is a very single line. If you want to read, you can read Oedipus and you will find out the whole story. Now, if you place the story of Oedipus within the context of the whole cycle of the tales, connected with the city of Thebes, he was king of Thebes. He then began to see repeated motifs and repeated contrasts on the basis of the interpretations. The way you interpret the story, you will get the meaning accordingly. On this method, the story you have taken out of the myth and the cycle, it is part of or are reconstituted in terms of basic oppositions. It is constituted in the form of basic oppositions because you're taking that story out of it and you're finding out differences and similarities. Claude Lévi-Strauss says you are simply reconstituting in terms of basic oppositions. The basic oppositions are, for example, animals, humans, or husband and son, or relation or stranger. You can add that, male and female. Now, if you see concrete details in the story of Oedipus, you will see that there is a context in the larger structure of that story. And the larger structure is seen as an overall network of basic dyadic pairs, opposition pairs, which have obvious symbolic, thematic, or having archetypal resonances. Now, this is the typical structuralist approach of moving from particular to general. Particular to general. You are studying a poem, particular poem, and then moving to general understanding about all the poems. Commonly, proverb is used in Marathi. Those who understand Marathi, they can able to understand it very quickly. Shitavarun bhatachi pariksha. Particular, general. You will not check each and every rice, individual item of rice, whether it is cooked or not. You take one and just pinch it in your hands and you can able to understand that, okay, the rice is cooked. Particular to general. Placing individuals' work within the wider structural context. The wider structure might also be found in, for example, in the whole corpus of an author's complete work, or in that particular genre, you can say. If you're taking a common example, Shakespeare's play, understanding one Shakespeare's play will help you to understand the whole idea of writer's work or that particular genre drama. Or Dickens's novel Hard Times, that how it deviates from novelistic conventions and those like a more popular genre, or like melodrama, or like ballad. Because identification of the sets of underlying fundamental dyads, DYADS, a signifying system in this sense is very wide concept, my friend, if you understand it. I've made it very clear to you, signifier and signified. What is the signifying system? Sign. That signifying system is a very wide concept. It means any organized and structured set of signs which carries cultural meaning. Every set of sign carrying a cultural meaning in it. Why? If I give an example, then I'll stop. We'll continue this in tomorrow's lecture. We'll have tomorrow also a lecture on Friday, and even on Saturday we have a lecture. In usually in Indian marriages, There is a one program before actual marriage takes place, and that is called as in typical Indian language called haldi. You paste turmeric. What this symbol, what it signifies. There's a cultural meaning for it. And so you find out there is no specific word in English language for that because that is not the culture of English people. If you want, if you are studying, if you're trying to translate certain things, and if somebody asks you that please translate this line in English, तिच्या अंगाला हळद लागली होती. और इन हिंदी इट इज सेड उसे हल्दी उसके शरीर पर हल्दी लगाई थी. How will you translate in English? Turmeric was pasted on her body, and if you use this word, will it carry the same cultural meaning that your language is having? There is a specific symbol, specific sets of symbols. And that specific sets of symbols need to be understood very carefully. How furthermore Claude Lévi-Strauss talks about this, we will continue it in tomorrow's lecture. Okay, friends.